Hey everyone, welcome to an impromptu episode of Off TRAQ. As many of you guys probably heard, earlier this morning, there was an announcement that the PGA Tour has finally dropped what might be the biggest structural change we've seen in professional golf in decades. Starting in 2028, the tour is essentially splitting into two divisions. There's going to be a top tier and a second tier, promotion, relegation. And I'm wondering, is the question suddenly going to be beyond just who wins a tournament, but who actually gets to stay in the top league? Roy, what was your initial take and reaction when you heard the news?
Initial reaction was, okay, so we're the Champions League now. And ironically, or maybe intentionally, they called it, the Championship Series. And then the second thought I had was, well, this isn't really that different from the way that it's been for a while, right? It's just what events you get access to, the purses in those events, those are very different. But outside of that, the concept of relegation, we just didn't call it relegation, right? It's like now they've just kind of added a second tier where it was the 125 or now recently top 100, you keep your card. If not, you lose your card, right? Quote unquote relegation. And then you have to go back to the Korn Ferry Tour or Q School to earn a way back in, right? So maybe now they have more of a feeder system or a minor league, but I actually don't think this is as big of a change as a lot of the reaction posts that I'm seeing.
Yeah, I think my reaction was the same. After really digging into the structure, I was like, it's not too different, but it is also a little different than how we assumed it would be, because we talked about it a couple weeks ago. But the one thing that I do think is clear is that the relegation system is a bit more clear now, because right now I feel like it's a little gray, right? It's not necessarily you'll lose your tour card if you don't hit a certain mark. It just means that you're not fully exempt from everything, right? So there are some tournaments that you still can play, but you don't get to play in others. So I think it just kind of clarifies that. But like you said, I didn't think it was a huge jump. And so maybe for this first segment, I did want to kind of talk a little bit about what the current model is today for the listeners that don't know. And also I was texting with a few friends and I realized a lot of them didn't know the current structure. And so I thought it'd be great to kind of talk about that. And then let's talk a little bit about the 2028 model. The first thing I think is the field size. Right now, the field size is mostly around the 144 to 150 if you include sponsor exemptions. With the championship series, they're going to cap that at 120. So it does make the field slightly smaller, but my initial thought was it's not small enough. 120 golfers is still a lot of stories, a lot of players that you have to follow. I thought they were going to condense this to like 60. Maybe 80. So yeah, from a field size perspective, it's not that much smaller.
Yeah, I agree with you. Going from 144 to 120, it's like, cool, those are the 24 names that you didn't know anyway, and that you weren't going to pay attention to anyway, right? So what is this change from a viewership perspective? Not much, right? It doesn't actually change a lot.
Yeah. The one thing that does change drastically is actually the purse size though. In the championship series, it's a minimum $20 million purse for every one of the 23 to 24. Well, when they say 23 to 24 events, I might be jumping ahead a little bit, but they're saying that that's going to include all the majors and the players. And so you take the 5 off and we're talking about, 19, 18 championship series tournaments, right? And so having a $20 million minimum purse is a pretty big deal. And I think that does change the economics of really being on this series more than the others, because the other one I think is a minimum of $4 million. So It's a very drastic jump down, because right now, other than the big tournaments, it's usually around that $9 to $10 million purse range, right?
Yeah, and I think they're saying for the relegation tour. Sorry, I should probably learn the proper name for it, but I'm just going to call it the relegation tour.
I think it's the Challenger series.
Thank you. You're right.
Yeah.
The Challenger series. Okay, so they're at what 144 player field. I think they get like a quote unquote full field, and I think it was, what did you say, like a $4 million minimum purse. Right. Yeah. So this is capitalism at its finest. The richest, best golfers keep getting richer and better because now they have less people to even compete with significantly larger purses. And those that are in the middle class, so to speak, of golf, who are trying to climb their way up are stuck sharing amongst more people a significantly smaller purse. So this one, I can't help but think this is a reaction to what LIV was. It just took them way too long to get here. I wonder if the news about LIV losing their funding came out a year ago. I wonder if the numbers would be the same, right? But, great for the golfers that stuck around for the PGA. They're finally getting their payday separate from the people that left for LIV. But This one feels a little weird to me because it's like it's such a big money disparity, so significant that I don't know, something about that just feels a little bit unfair.
Yeah, and what was interesting is from everything I've read, it seems like the Corn Ferry Tour is still going to stay as another minor
feeder.
league. Right. And so I was a little bit confused because especially with the number of golfers that are in each series now, I feel like a lot of the Corn Ferry players would have to jump up to make up that 144 field, right? And so then does the Corn Ferry Tour become even like a less of a league? The greatest, I think, comparison comes to mind is the English Premier League, right? You have the Premier League, you have the Championship, and then you have League One. And
League One, League Two. Whatever.
Yeah. But it's kind of becoming that sort of system, but I think it diminishes the Corn Ferry Tour even more from what I'm reading so far.
Yeah, I think it was already hard to justify watching the Corn Ferry. It was literally like if you were, maybe you like the underdog story, or maybe you have somebody that you had an affiliation to. But I felt like the Corn Ferry was only something that was intentionally watched if literally there was no other golf tournament on, right? So then they would just play it. This one pushes it down for me psychologically even more, where I'm just like, this is the minor of the minors. Like, if I argue that most people don't have the mental capacity to follow all of the golfers, right? This pushes them down even more a step, right? So I agree with you.
Yeah. Well, with the current setup, let's talk a little bit about why is the tour actually doing this now? Like, what problem are they actually trying to solve? Do you have any thoughts on why you think the tour is doing it today?
I think it's a few reasons. One, we already mentioned it, and we've talked about this a lot. This is the direct competition to live, right? So it's how do you get a higher prize pool into the hands of your most valuable resources, right? And that's what these golfers are to the tour. They're resources, right? They're part of the product. So you have to keep them happy. And there was a lot of noise being made about, oh, we play too many events. We don't make enough money. Wah, 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 wah. Sorry, that's not what they said. But that's how I heard it. So that was one. And then the other thing that we talked about a lot is the fact that these events are just, they're commonplace and boring, right? There's no drama, there's no story. So being able to weave in this story of who's getting relegated, like, oh, if he makes this putt, he makes it into the championship series, right? It adds a flavor of drama that I think has been sorely missing. What we've talked about so many times, right? Like, there is no storyline today. This adds a storyline that gets interwoven into 18 to 20 of the biggest tournaments of the year.
Yeah, so that is what I was hoping that the tour would do by creating these series. But I actually don't think they actually solved that issue, because if you look at the top players today, the Scotties and the Rorys, they play somewhere around that like mid to high teens in terms of PGA Tour events per year. That's exactly what they're going to be playing in this new championship series, right? And then the grinders, the younger players, the bubble players, they play around 20 to 24 events. So maybe, if you're on the lower end of that ranking, if you're like in this 50s to 90s range, you will be playing a little bit less. But I actually don't feel like they've helped with the dilution issue, because the big issue right now is there's the John Deere going on, the 3M, there's all these Rocket Mortgage, there's all these tournaments going on. And for the most part, most audiences don't care or even know what is going on today, right? How is doing the current structure of the championship series, other than the purse being so high, going to necessarily change that? I don't see how it's solving that issue.
Yeah, I think the problem, and you hit it on the head, it's the relegation drama is kind of focused around, let's call it numbers 70 through 120. Right? Like, that's where the swirl happens. And unless a big name that's just been a household name, let's call it a Ricky or a Jordan, right? Somebody who hasn't been as good recently, maybe they end up in the relegation bubble at some point. Well, that's an interesting story. But for the most part, the people that you know and follow, the Scotties, the Rorys, they're not even close to that bubble. So the way that the story unfolds today doesn't actually change systematically once you have a relegation story. Now it's like, oh, you have a little bit more reason to pay attention to number 89. But cool, did you ever know who number 89 was, and did you really care? Probably not, right? So this doesn't really add the emotional burden of the storytelling any more than you would have had today.
Yeah, I do think that the tour is going to create a lot more content around players in that relegation zone, very similar to how the NFL Films documents the NFL season and creates storylines. So I do think they're going to do that, but I'm a little skeptical on if the everyday audience is really going to care as much unless a big name is there. I just did a very quick search on some big or known names that might potentially be in the danger zone, and there are a few. So for example, Max Homa right now is around that 60s range. So if he struggles a few tournaments, mostly, towards the end of the year, he might fall into that relegation zone, although the relegation zone is like 90, right? And so he still has a bit to drop. Keegan Bradley is right now around the 80s. So he would be a bubble golfer that everyone knows. Matt Kuchar is actually outside of that 120 number. He's around like 140s right now. So he would be in the relegation zone. And also another name that a lot of people would know is Tom Kim. Tom Kim was actually also in that 140s range until he had a really good showing at the US Open, which dropped him down to the 60s. So there are some names, whether it's injuries, whether it's, personal challenges, whatever that they're going through, there are going to be names, but I'm just wondering if it's going to be enough and also an opportunity to highlight other golfers in that relegation zone and make the everyday audience really care.
Yeah, I didn't even know Matt Kuchar was still playing. I think the last time I heard of Matt Kuchar was he was involved in some story about how much he tipped a temporary caddy, and that might have been like 10 years ago. But I think that highlights the point, right? So there are all these golfers. Tom Kim, do I know him? Sure. Do I care if he gets relegated or not? Not really. Keegan Bradley, do I know him? Sure. Do I care? Not really. Max Homa might be the only one I'm like, oh, that's kind of disappointing, right? And only because he's hilarious on social media, right? So it actually has nothing to do with his golf, right? But I keep coming back to like, this bubble is going to be probably bigger conceptually than it is in practice. It doesn't actually make it a meaningful difference because out of the range that you listed was 70 or so odd players, right? Because you said Matt Kuchar was 140, right? And then Max Homa was in like the 60s or 70s, right? So that range, we found 4 or 5 names that we might care about. Right. So I think this just goes to highlight like the other 60 or so that we didn't even mention, like nobody's going to care if they're getting relegated or not, or it's not going to affect the story on a week to week basis.
So the challenge for the tour is going to be to make those players a lot more interesting. But I'm like I said, very skeptical about it. I'm surprised you don't care about Tom Kim. He's very eccentric on the course, and he has a lot
of hilarious.
But he's very streaky.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing, right? It's like there's almost this level of like, who do you want to root for? And I'm more interested in the story of how long is Scotty going to keep number one, right? Like how long can he keep this up? Like he's starting to creep up on like some of Tiger's records, right? Like to me, that is a much more interesting story arc than anything else that's going on. Or like Rory finding form this quote unquote late in his career and like how dominant can he be? Like those are to me more interesting. And maybe it's because that's what the media is feeding. But I actually am genuinely curious about those storylines and questions versus like, hey, number 89 is going to lose his card or lose his opportunity to be even richer. I will say the one big change that I think is really interesting is the actual Tour Championship, right? Which has been held at East Lake for as long as the FedEx Cup has been a thing, right? So for a really long time. Well, now they're saying they're going to move it across the country, which I think is actually very good, right? Probably not the best that one's always at the same course, but they're also changing it to match play, right? Yes. I feel like this is something that you mentioned a few weeks ago in an episode where we need more match play. But to have the last championship of the year be in match play format, that is interesting.
Yeah. Was that confirmed, or did they just say that part of the playoff is going to be match play?
I think it is part of the playoff, but the finale itself is going to be match play.
Oh, I love that. Like that creates so much drama. And I love just head-to-head golf. No, I think that's actually a really good, that's probably the best part of this new system that I've heard so far. Let's quickly just talk about like who are the actual like winners and losers of this structure. If you could think of, are there any winners in this new format?
Top 50 golfers.
Yeah.
Guaranteed a lot more money, right? Like they're the clear winners of this scenario.
Yeah. It essentially becomes a signature event. Like everything in the championship series is a signature event. The one thing that I do love, which we didn't talk about though, is that the 36-hole cuts are coming back. And I didn't love that there were no cuts in the signature events. And so I love the fact that cuts are coming back.
Yeah. I mean, they have to, right? Otherwise, how are you going to start relegating people if everybody's making money every week?
And I guess that would make weekend golf a lot more interesting because it doesn't really change, but from 120 players, the cut line usually cuts out about half, 2/3.
Yeah. So from 140 something, it's about 70 plus ties is usually the format. So, okay, great. You make this like 60 plus ties. You lose a few names, but what is that? 2.5 tee times?
From a fan perspective, do you think that we've won or lost as fans, or is it about the same?
If you include the Tour Championship change, I think we've won. If you include just the Championship Tour and relegation, I think it's about the same.
Yeah, I'm very curious how the everyday fan is going to care about the relegation system. When I talk to my friends that are heavily into soccer or football, everywhere else in the world it's called, that relegation system actually keeps them very engaged with like the local teams, especially in England. So yeah, I am curious how that would translate to golf, but I guess the verdict is still out on that one. What about the broadcast partners? Do you think, are they winners or losers with this new structure?
That's a good question. I think that they are. I think this is going to gain a little bit more eyeballs, right? So for the broadcast partners, the media, and general viewership, so let's call it, there's probably a little bit of a win. Sponsorships get a little bit more valuable, and they kind of have to be if you're going to say that the guaranteed payout is a 20 million plus purse. Is it meaningful? I don't know. I think the jury's going to be out on this one for a while.
Okay, now, are there any losers for this structure? I know we talked about, I've coined the term, the PGA Tour middle class, but they're definitely losers in this, right?
Yeah, the PGA Tour middle class for sure. The Corn Ferry Tour for sure, right? Because now it's like your relegation's relegation, right? So they're League One or whatever they're called. Who else loses? I mean,
I think there's only one other major loser, which I think is the tournament sponsors, especially the sponsors that are going to be sponsoring the events that get dropped into the Challenger Series, because they can't have everything in the championship, right? And so maybe it's going to just create more of a bidding war for these sponsors to want to get into the championship series. But I do think that the tournament sponsors lose a little bit.
Yeah, that's fair. And you already mentioned this, but like keeping it at 20, right? So if we take out the majors and the players, that's still a lot. That's still like 4 months straight of like quote unquote championship series tournaments every weekend. So just going back to what you were saying, the sponsors they might be losing a little bit more because now again, nothing is that important, right? So we've kind of stripped away some of the prestige. The majors will keep them, the players will keep it. But for everything else, it's harder to be seen as a prestigious tournament now because there's so much money and so much riding on all of these tournaments now.
All right. Well, before we close, I wanted to do like a quick rapid fire, like either buy or sell this idea. So Roy, I'll ask you a question and you tell me if you buy this or if you're going to sell this. First statement, this new relegation system makes the PGA Tour easy to follow.
Sell. Because now you have to have a vested interest in more names to follow the drama versus right now there's no drama.
The next one is the Challenger Series will feel like a real tour, not just a minor league.
No, I buy the statement. No, hold on. No, I sell that statement. It will absolutely it will be a minor league. It's the middle class, golf's middle class. That's what we're going to call them.
Yeah, no, it truly now does position it as golf's middle class, right? Because you have the greats, you have the up and comers, and then you have the people stuck in the middle. It's purgatory, golf purgatory. All right. The next statement, a relegation battle will be more entertaining than some tournament wins.
Sell. The relegation battle would be amazing if people on the bubble had to go into their own match play tournament and actually play through relegation. Right now, relegation happens asynchronously at different points in different periods, right? So it's this amorphous thing, and you have to keep track of everybody to really understand where relegation's happening. And by that, I mean, you're relying on the media to feed you the relegation stories, right? If you could see, I actually really like this now that we're talking about it.
Yeah.
If you can make relegation a tournament, a single match play tournament, that I think would be just as interesting as the majors.
Maybe I'm like mixing up things that were in my brain, but didn't they actually say there is going to be some sort of tournament or way for people in relegation to like move back in to the championship series?
I thought it was you have to be a money leader. I'm going to have to look this up.
Actually, yeah, let's look that up real quick.
You have to win twice. If you get 2 wins on the Challenger Series, or if you're the top 20 on the points list, which I think it generally equates to money list, or you have to win a major. If you do one of those 3 things, you make it back up into the Challengers, the Championship Series.
But I mean, if you do those things, you automatically get bumped in your rankings anyway, right? I actually love that idea of a match play, like win your way into the Championship Series. Because the big thing for me is I actually don't think everyone from the Challenger Series, because the best players in the Challenger Series might not be better than the worst of the Championship Series. So I actually do love the blending of the 2 series at the end where they have to battle for their way to get into the Championship Series. So Brian Rolab, I think he needs to listen to our podcast and incorporate this, because that would make it super, super interesting.
Oh yeah.
I love that idea.
Right. And it kind of solves the whole, like, the last major is in July, right? The Championship Series starts in September, I think, right? And it concludes in October or something like that. So there's like a month and a half of just like regular tournaments. If that became like a relegation watch, feeding into who even qualifies for that tournament versus who is getting pushed into that tournament from the Championship Series, and then culminate in like a big match play tournament where the decision is being made live, that I would love that.
Yeah.
That I would watch.
Yeah. The only downside to that is it does kind of diminish the Challenger Series a bit, because even if you win and you're the best, you might still not make it at the end of it if you don't win this playoff, right? So I think it does diminish the series a little bit, but from a spectator and audience perspective, I love that idea. Buy or sell. This structure will help reunify golf eventually when LIV folds.
So I don't see how this has a meaningful impact on the LIV golfers coming back.
Oh, you don't think so?
No.
Because I see the tour saying, LIV golfers, if you're coming back, you are going to play in the Challenger Series and you have to earn your way into the championship, especially with the number of field. Because even if everyone from the Korn Ferry is to make up the difference in this Challenger Series, I actually don't think that there's enough top tier talent to be in the Challenger Series. But it actually makes sense if you think of the number of golfers on LIV that are going to defect if the league folds. Then the number kind of makes sense that all those golfers coming in would make up the Challenger Series. And if that happens, it does elevate the Challenger Series a bit, because there are still good golfers on LIV. And if they are forced to play on the Challenger Series, it suddenly puts a lot of interest and eyeballs into the Challenger Series, which otherwise you would not have. So I actually buy the idea that this will help reunify golf eventually.
I'll give that to you for the first year, maybe the second year. By the third year, though, right, that entire storyline is gone.
Okay, last, buy or sell. This new structure will save the PGA Tour.
Sell.
You sold everything.
I've sold everything because I don't think it went far enough, right? I think it didn't go far enough, and it rewarded too many of the people that were already getting rewarded. Right. So the drama is centered around the wrong place, except for the match play at the end of the season. The money is now being centralized a little bit more than it was. Right. So if you are on the edge, so to speak, right, like it's even harder for you. I mean, again, we keep joking about this, but this is truly capitalism at its finest and the true creation of a golf middle class. But if we study our history and our economics, middle classes are doomed to failure. Right. Like the existence of a middle class is very much, it has to be governed. So I think that, at least for me personally, it's a step in the right direction, but not a big enough step. And I think there's too much rewarding the players that are very, very vocal right now. And, you know, not to name names, but the ones we know that are like in the Players Association with seats at the table. Yeah. It's rewarding them too much versus making golf universally more interesting to watch and follow.
Yeah. I mean, I was just going to say, like, who do you think are the ones that are really pitching to change the structure, right? It's not Brian by himself. He did say there's like a committee of players, right? But I'm like, you're not going to have the 90th ranked player in these committees. No. Well, whether you love this idea or hate it, I do think this is one of the more significant structural changes we've seen in modern golf. And it'll be very interesting to see how this is going to shape the sport for years to come. Let us know what you think, though, down in the comments. Does this make professional golf more compelling for you? Does it make it too exclusive? Or maybe it doesn't really change anything? Well, thanks for listening to today's impromptu episode. Be sure to click like and subscribe and share us with your friends. And we'll catch you next time on Off Track.